Okay, so you mentioned something that I found interesting, which is you talked about how first through say fourth gen or just the generations, it's like they don't seem to have a unification of values. You talked about one wanted to give back to the city that benefited them so much, but maybe like second, third, fourth gen doesn't live in that city. Would you,
Hmm.
and so then there's sort of tension or maybe even infighting about it, but would you say like to what degree are the tensions that you see in families a result of like disunification of values or not shared values?
I would say part of its values, but I would say even before that, I think it's how the foundation is set up, if it's a family foundation, because, and really not whether or not the original donors and those that started the foundation take a moment to think ahead, like multiple generations into the future, right? It could have a crystal ball or whatever, and just recognize that our situation today is different than what our kids' situation and our grandkids and our great grandkids' situation will be. Their lives are going to be different. The world's going to be different. And so I think it's important to set the foundation up both with clarity as to what's important to the donors. If you want to give back into the community, which makes a lot of sense, right? You made your money in this community and you want to give back to it. That's great. But just thinking ahead to the fact that it's not likely that everyone's going to still live there and they're going to be elsewhere. And if you want this foundation to exist in perpetuity, which often they are set up that way, then you want to be able to accommodate your family and you want to engage the family. You want to be able to accommodate them in meaningful ways. So I think it's part of it's clarifying what actually is important to you as the donors, if it's an issue or cause or geography or the value of relationships, the value of trusting your grantees, the ensuring, diversity of opinion, whatever that is, also incorporate the importance of being adaptive and flexible and acknowledging that things will change and subsequent boards of directors are encouraged to make decisions aligned with the mission of the foundation and the values of the foundation, but that, might navigate a somewhat different path. I mean, if a foundation started in 1975, that's a whole different world than, today's life, right? I mean, there weren't
Mm-hmm.
computers, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't all that we're experiencing today. And so I just think it's important that, you have that mindset of multiple generations ahead when you're creating something.
I see. Okay. So thinking past, I've made all this money and I sold out of my business for like half a billion. And so I'm going to preserve this. But you're saying the transition in thinking there is most helpful when one is thinking 3 to 5 generations down the road, not just what's the best thing for this money today. So maybe it's like multi-layered. It's like
Yeah,
what, how,
yeah, because you need to think about both, right? On a practical level, you're thinking about, well, this is today's reality and this is what's happening and this is where I want to allocate the wealth philanthropically, but also just because I'm retired and not working and, we have ample money doesn't mean that 3 generations from now, people aren't going to be, my grandkids aren't going to be hustling for work. And,
Mhm.
uh, just because I have a lot of children does not mean that my children or children's children are going to have, like there might not be the same value around having kids, for example. And so they could be living around the country, around the world. So I just think you just need to anticipate change. Even if,
Mhm.
of course, you don't know what that's going to look like, just build flexibility into the bylaws of the foundation, literally.
Like one concern that I have, even for myself, is wealth corrupts. If my kids didn't earn the money, it tends to have a corrupting effect on third, fourth, fifth generations. And so like how do you combat that? Or is that the focus of your work in helping combat the sort of I maybe call it the spoiled brat syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to raise children, if you are a family, an affluent family and you're philanthropic, there's lots of ways that you can raise your kids from an early, early age to appreciate that wealth and to be generous in how they live. As a mom, that starts with kids like sharing your toys. You know what I mean? Like thinking
Mm,
about others, thinking about the new kid at school, and that kid is probably scared and lonely, and make sure if there's a new kid at school, you walk up to them and introduce yourself and invite them to lunch or recess. You know what I mean? I think it's part of it is teaching them at a young age, like to think outside of them and to think about, the underdog, or think about how do I help or
Hmm.
share. I think also, of course, you can also think about how do you set aside some of your allowance or some of the money you might receive for your birthday to donate to others. There are certainly ways to volunteer together as a family, or, help your kids to volunteer. And as they get older, that happens more and more in high school and whatnot. So I just think part of it is building that giving, caring, philanthropic muscle in your kids with the same intent that you might build their sports muscles, you know what I mean? Or their academic muscles,
Mm.
and being creative in how you go about that. And,
Hmm.
with family philanthropy, it's also recognizing that the wealth isn't yours. Once it's in a family foundation or a donor advised fund, it is no longer your wealth. You might be involved in guiding how it is allocated, but it's the public's wealth, and it's for public good. And it's a privilege to be a part of a family that is philanthropic, and a privilege to be involved in giving that away. It's not a right. So I think kind of instilling that in a family is also really helpful.
So what I'm hearing there is it's basic character building, like basic values that would be
Hmm.
good to teach your kids, whether or not money ever enters into the picture, because it's always the right thing to do to put yourself
Absolutely.
in the other guy's shoes. Yeah, or to have
Absolutely.
compassion or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Almost
Hmm.
as a link of identity to his father. Like this is
Hmm.
who we are, and we're going to continue on this tradition. That
Hmm.
one resonates deeply for me because you don't need money either way. It's like
Hmm.
those, I think those core identity ties that bind are the most important to begin with, and then the money comes
Hmm.
after that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think to the first example, a lot of data bears out that wealth is lost by the third generation, and that's across many cultures.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the challenge is, again, not recognizing that and thinking ahead. And how do you think now about how do we prevent that over time? And
Yes.
also to this point of your other example, where the son is, I guess, cognizant of that and wanting to maintain that relationship and that connection to his dad, a lot of it comes down to communication, family communication, and
Mhm.
making sure that, you're communicating values to your kids and grandkids, that you're
Yes.
communicating about, as age appropriately, about family wealth, about family values, about family business, about whatever it is, and engaging people in appropriate ways, and having, if there's interest and desire among everybody, on ramps into whatever that is, meaning an on ramp into opportunities to work at a business, or an on ramp into opportunities to be involved in the philanthropy, maybe on a youth board or a junior board, or some people just give their kids small donor advised funds, whatever that might be, giving them ways to get engaged and really learn kind of
Hmm.
at an experiential level what that means. But again, it's a privilege, and recognizing that that's
Hmm.
not necessarily just a right. So I feel
Hmm.
badly for the yacht and the and I feel
The
bad
yacht
for
took a
the young
beating.
man, like that's not, we can say, oh, spoiled brat, but I
No,
think a
there's
lot
something
of times
complex.
those kids, yeah, there's a lot of complex
Yeah.
psychology there. And,
Yes.
how, and a lot of people feel when they don't make the wealth that they're not worthy of being successful, because
Mm.
they've never had to go through those difficult times of kind of slogging away at a job or whatever it is. And so
Yeah.
you're setting up your kids for, I think, a lot of emotional, I mean, I'm not a therapist or psychologist, but I think you're setting people up for a lot of emotional damage.
Yes. Like that's a heavy burden to inherit a lot of money. And it's not that
Hmm.
it's bad or can't be done. It's that anything with gravitas has to be, you have to grow up into it. So that, yeah, it's funny that when you talk, there are so many parallels to how Bitcoiners think
Mm.
because it's the very similar mindset of, hey, our wealth is being dissolved by fiat currency and it's inflating away. Like the dollar has lost 97% of its value since 1913.
Hmm.
And so we got to do something different. Bitcoiners believe that Bitcoin provides an off ramp from the fiat system and thus long term capital preservation. and I need to be careful that I don't make any guarantees or permissory promises of returns. That's not really what I'm saying. It's an alternative that's designed to help with long-term preservation. So my point is, Bitcoiners think very similarly to family offices, yet they're
Hmm.
worlds apart.
Hmm.
That's what's fun for me, is that when I talk with people like you or family offices, I just see all these parallels, and it's fun to
Hmm.
just sort of highlight those and point them out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I was always interested in the nonprofit sector. I don't really know why, but I always helping others was always a motivating factor for me. And I ended up, not surprisingly, getting a master's in social work. And then I went to work at Stanford University, and I was evaluating youth and gang violence prevention programs because when I was getting my master's, I took some courses in program evaluation and learned that I really liked assessing the impact of things. Is a social program working or not working? And if it's not working, how do you improve it? So I went to work at Stanford. It was a public health research center. And this project was funded entirely by one foundation, the California Wellness Foundation. And they were really trying to prevent youth violence statewide in California. But this was at a time when youth violence was really seen as a juvenile justice problem. And they wanted to shift that perception to more of a public health prevention situation. And they approached it with a lot of different interventions, meaning they were supporting young people in low-income communities of color throughout the state. They were supporting schools. They were also supporting research on gun violence. They were supporting policy advocacy and shifting people's opinions. So I really thought to myself, if you have a lot of money, like that's great, but that isn't going to solve a problem necessarily. But if you are thoughtful, if you bring in the right experts, really look at best practices, what's working, what is the evidence showing, and create a thoughtful intervention, you can create a lot of social change. So I thought, well, that's cool. I'll go to work at a foundation. So I went to work at the David and Lucile Packard Foundation, which is the family foundation of Dave Packard of HP. And that was and still is one of the largest foundations in the country, and very strategic national global foundation. And I learned there that I really enjoyed working in philanthropy. So then I began getting offers to do consulting on the side. I learned that I liked consulting and philanthropy and decided to go off on my own. So one of my first clients was Charles and Helen Schwab's Family Foundation. Worked with them for many years, and then it took off. And yada, 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 26 years later, I'm still at it.
Okay. So it's working well for you. You're obviously cut out for it.
Yeah, and what I like about working for myself, as I'm sure you can understand, is I can ebb and flow. Like I can change course. I can try new things. If they work, great, I'll keep doing it. If they don't work, I'll just stop doing it. If I get bored doing something, I'll stop. You know what I mean? So my practice has certainly evolved. Now I work much more with ultra high net worth donors, families, family offices, CEOs of foundations, and help them on a much more strategic level to figure out what is the impact they want to have and how do we create that impact for them.
Okay, cool. So I love the sociological. I feel like we could do this for like another hour, but I love the sociological aspect of what you do. And I think that's probably where we overlap and sort of connect, just in terms of
Hmm.
interest.
Hmm.
Bitcoin has a huge sociological element to it. It brings in game theory and all kinds of other stuff. So it's not just a sort of asset.